Thank you. And good evening and welcome to today's meeting of the Governance Committee. I'm Councillor Eric Pattenden and I will be chairing the meeting. Today's meeting is being held both over Zoom and with councillors present in the meeting room. In addition to myself and the other members of the committee in attendance are councillors Dominic Bowick, Jeremy Cottam, Laura Coyle, Carolyn Culver, Billy Drummond, Owen Jeffrey, Alan McCrow and Howard Wollaston. We also are expecting, if not already there, Councillor David Southgate attending as Parish Council Representative and Simon Carey, Independent Member for Audit. Parish councillors, independent members and members on Zoom are permitted to speak at the meeting, but they are not permitted to propose, second or vote on the items. Sarah Clark, Executive Director for Resources, will be advising the meeting. Gordon Oliver is the clerk for the meeting and Thomas Radbourne is the Zoom host. If we hear the evacuation alarm this evening, we must leave the building immediately. Please proceed via the safe emergency exit route, which will be shown to us by the trained officers present. Please follow any of their instructions. The assembly point is the car park of the Dolphin Pub. So we move on to item 1, apologies. Clerk, have we had any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chairman, we've received apologies from Councillor Stephanie Stevenson and Councillor Alan McCrow is substituting.
Thank you. Item 2 is minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes on the agenda. I'll take them separately. I'll therefore propose that the minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of September 2025 be signed as a correct record. Can I ask for a seconder? Councillor Drummond. Any amendments from the floor? No, okay, thank you. And vote on those. Thank you. Unanimous. And now minutes for the 18th of November 2025 to be signed as a correct record. I propose, and can I ask for a seconder? Councillor Wollaston, thank you. Any amendments from the floor? No. Okay, so vote on those. Thank you, it's carried. And I can sign those after the meeting. Item 3, declarations of interest. Have we received any declarations of interest?
No, we haven't received any declarations in advance of the meeting, Chairman.
Thank you. Any from the floor? No. No. Item 4 is forward plan. Would officers and members like to propose any amendments to the forward plan? Or shall we stick with it? Thank you. If the committee are happy to note the forward plan, we'll move to the next item, which is item 5 and the actions log. And let me just make this a bit bigger. Would officers, members like to propose any amendments or comments on the actions log? Councillor Culver.
Thank you very much, Chairman. One of the actions is to create a single PDF of the Constitution, and it says here that it's completed. There are PDFs for each section of the Constitution online, but not a single PDF. I don't know whether there's been a misunderstanding about what it was that members required, but the whole point was that people could not find what they were looking for. They were having to go into different sections on the website, so we wanted a single PDF, not lots of individual ones. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Sargent, would you like to comment on that?
Thank you. I'm just verifying that, but I think that is the case, that there is a single PDF. Happy to show Councillor Culver that offline if that would be helpful.
Perhaps you could share a link for
yes, of course.
The committee. Thank you. Any other comments on the actions log? There was one item that's in progress. I wonder, Mrs. Clark, whether you might like to comment on that.
Yeah, so I have a number of documents that I am due to provide to the Task and Finish group. I had, or the Task and Finish group had a number of officers in to talk about the iTrent project recently. So I will supply all of those documents together. So I have requested details of the Abertras project, so that will be supplied in one tranche, hopefully next week.
Great, thanks very much. Okay, if the committee are happy to note the log, we'll go to the next item. Do we have people from KPMG here? Normally they're on.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Just checking. So yeah, item 6 is the KPMG draft Auditors Annual Report 2024 to 25. And according to my notes, Jonathan Brown and Jess Townsend from KPMG to introduce the report.
Yes, unfortunately, Jess is ill tonight, so it's just me. There's kind of two reports we have on the agenda tonight: our Auditor's Annual Report and also our ISA 260 report, which is a more detailed report on our audit. They're working copies of our document. Why are they working copies? We're not quite finished on the audit. We're quite a long way there. But we've just got a small handful of things remaining. As a firm, KPMG haven't finalised the wording of our audit opinions for this cycle yet. And that's due to some late guidance issued by the NAO just before Christmas that our technical teams are just working their way through. So what you have here tonight is our kind of working versions, which is why you've got some square brackets in there and some red text to say the final wording of the opinion hasn't been agreed. In terms of where we are on the audit, we're substantially complete. There's a handful of items that we're waiting for, but we expect to receive those before the end of February, which is our statutory backstop deadline to be able to sign our opinions and report. So when we get those final pieces of information, we will update both of these documents and circulate to you with our opinions. In terms of the Auditor's Annual Report, it's meant to summarise all the work we do, and therefore it's probably a good one to talk through. And then I'll pause and see if you want me to go into more detail. Page 4 of that report, the executive summary on page 26 of the pack, highlights the various responsibilities we have over the financial statements, over the other information in the report, our value for money conclusions, and the work we do on our whole of government accounts. So in relation to the financial statements, we'll be issuing a disclaimer of opinion again this year. That is what we'd planned to do. That's what we'd shared in previous years and in our audit plan. We have been able to complete, or we expect to be able to complete our audit this year, which is slightly further forward than we got to with last year's audit. And I would very much like to thank the finance team, Chris, Shannon and the team for responding to our queries and challenge this year. Like I said, we expect to finalise everything we wanted to do this year, which is a really good position to be in. In terms of the financial statements, we'll be issuing a disclaimer of opinion because of those 2 years that you were unable to get an audit opinion. Again, the landing path that I used to talk about last year is still on track. So we will move to a qualified opinion next year, and then an unqualified opinion the year after that, which is in line with our plan. In terms of the financial statements, we haven't found any significant issues. I'll go into some of the detail around our significant risks areas, around pensions, around investment property, around valuation of assets, and management override of controls, which are significant risks. We've completed the work in the vast majority of those areas and haven't found any errors or anything to report to you. I'll work on for value for money. We've identified 2 weaknesses. You will remember last year we identified one weakness about the financial position of the council, accessing EFS, and we challenged you on whether your transformation plan was, could be bigger, better, stronger, etc. And we're still reviewing the responses to that, but it's likely that will remain a significant weakness. And then we've raised another significant weakness this year, which we have at a number of places, about the rising DSG deficit, designated schools grant deficit, that we know it's a national problem. We know many councils are seeing an increased deficit each year, but we're just highlighting that as a significant weakness because we're seeing some councils doing things locally to help that reduce that overall deficit while still waiting for a national response and a national solution. In terms of whole of government accounts, we're required to perform certain procedures to the National Audit Office. We can't do that until they've completed their work, so that is very much on hold. On page 5, it sets out our other responsibilities in terms of, public interest reports, formal recommendations. We haven't done any of that and don't expect to do any of those as part of our audit. That is, serious stuff. Then you'll see on page 8 and 9 where we talk about our significant risks, the valuation of land and buildings, what we've done, the valuation of investment property, the valuation of pensions, the procedures we've done on our findings, which is we didn't find any errors or misstatements or any indicators of any kind of management bias or tweaking of the numbers to hit targets or anything like that. So I will pause there, Chair, on the basis that I'm sure you've all read the reports and answer any questions there may be.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown. And it's good news that your progress to be able to give a qualified opinion is on track, if not ahead of schedule. And also, I think that, you've sort of highlighting the position that this council is in, that is very similar to lots of other councils around the country. So thank you for that. Members, any questions? Councillor Cottam.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Through you, the direct schools grant, is there a particular reason that this has worsened in the part, in the last couple of years?
Fundamentally, the demand for services outstrip the funding you get to deliver those services.
Thank you.
Councillor Berwick.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Brown. I have a question relating to Children and Family Services and SEND. So not the same direction of questioning as Councillor Cottam's. Do any of your findings relate directly or indirectly to financial control, demand management, and any forecast, any weaknesses, forecast or otherwise, in delivery of children and family services and support for SEND?
Our recommendations don't link to any of those specific areas, but I suppose my challenge is, should they, when the scope of our audit is the kind of combined numbers, but no, our recommendations aren't linked to control in those specific areas.
Thank you.
Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much for this report, sir. You mentioned transformation. We are having a Resources and Place Scrutiny Committee meeting next Tuesday to look at the transformation programme. They did come to talk to us in September, so this will be a follow-up. As anyone who was at that meeting will know, we do have concerns because we haven't been satisfied yet that programme is actually making a net saving. And we understand, sorry, beg your pardon. We understand from the Section 151 officer that it does clearly have to make a saving, and we have asked for comprehensive details. A report's been published today for that meeting. That's online at the moment, and members will be having a look at that. But I hope that specific members and officers will be able to come to that meeting and give us satisfaction that there is a net saving. We know that the care homes, we didn't find an alternative provider. We didn't find an alternative provider for the resource centres either. So it's very important in this current financial situation that we do keep an eye on that. And I take heart from the fact that KPMG are also keeping an eye on that as well. Chairman, can I just clarify, are we taking questions on both reports or just the first one at the moment?
Just the first at the moment.
Thank you.
Any other questions, members, on that, on the first report? If not, Mr. Brown, maybe you could introduce the second one.
Excuse me, Chairman, we have a hand raised by Simon Carey.
Oh, sorry, I can't see hands, so you'll have to, apologies. Mr. Carey, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, John, on page 9 of your report, management override of controls, just a quick one. Your findings are stated to be the work is currently ongoing. Is it progressing as planned? Is it on track, or are there problems with this one? Anything like that?
Yeah, so that work is looking at, you know, where management can use their position to manipulate the numbers. So a lot of the work we do is on journals, and we used various techniques to look for abnormalities in postings or things like that. And we use our techniques to pick a sample and then drill down into that sample and agree them to supporting evidence and you know, tick them back in quite a lot of detail. Our sample, I think we've got a handful that we're still waiting for that support. So it's just a handful, and you know, it's on Chris's list to get back to us.
Sorry, that'll find its way into the
yeah, document. Yeah, but that will be updated for our before the end of February.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. The second report then, please, Mr. Brown.
Yeah, so our second report is the more detailed findings on our audit, and it's very much driven by, we call it the ICE 260, it's International Standards of Auditing 260, which says what we have to talk to the governance committee about. So you will see a few pages explaining about the statutory backstop and this rebuilding assurance that we spoke of over the last couple of years. You know, fundamentally, all the regulators are working together to try and get back to the promised land of unqualified opinions as quickly and as painlessly as we can. For you, it will mean a disclaimer of opinion again this year, and then that move in future years to qualified and then unqualified. You will remember last year there were certain areas of the audit that we weren't able to complete, things like payroll, because you'd had a new payroll system and we couldn't get back into the, you know, we've done those this year and we've completed everything we wanted to, which shows that progression year on year. The detailed wording of our opinion is still being agreed, but you know, hopefully we'll be able to make it clear that that increase in engagement and ability to do our audit and that landing path in future years. So you will see on page 7 our kind of executive summary of the audit, where again those significant audit risks that I've mentioned are listed. Our management override of controls work remains ongoing, and you'll see in the outstanding matters on the bottom right, journals testing in relation to management override of controls, as I said in response to Simon. Some of the pensions disclosures were just ticking through, and a little bit of test work on the collection fund. But you know, if we compared that to where we were this time last year, it was a couple of pages of outstanding matters. Then the next few slides go into each of the significant risk areas, says what we did and what we found. which I don't intend to go into unless anybody wants me to go into the detail. And then it moves through some of the other areas of risk that we highlighted on a plan, adoption of IFRS 16, some of the CapEx spends, the new payroll system. And then we look at management judgments just to make sure that, you're taking a similar view on management judgments and estimates year on year. So that's on page 21 and 22. So I'll pause there again, Chair, to see if there's any particular questions.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Just a quick one from me for starters. So on for example, page 8, valuation of land and buildings, and on similar pages, there's a sort of scale on the right-hand side from cautious to neutral to optimistic, and then a purple dot. I wonder if you might just tell us what that is showing on those pages, please.
Yeah, so the feedback we used to get is a very binary. It's okay or it's not okay, and therefore, with any kind of valuation assumption, you've got a range that's both acceptable. So you can be a little bit more prudent or a little bit more optimistic. And so on those sliders, if you like, we're trying to show year on year you're in the same place. When our valuation specialists look at how you valued things, and the range of values you could potentially take, you're slightly towards the optimistic side, but it would be nothing to worry about and nothing that we don't see elsewhere.
Okay. All right, thank you. Members, Councillor Cottam.
Yes, thank you. You beat me to it. I was going to thank them very much for that sliding scale. That is very, very helpful. But I have to say my heart sank when I saw this big blue square with an exclamation sign in it. Significant audit risk. And I thought that meant, oh gosh, there's something really, really bad here. But then I go and read the article and it's not, it maybe slightly devalues the exclamation mark in future. If there's something that's really important and you want to highlight to councillors, I would suggest maybe just the significant audit risk. And then if there's an exclamation box with an exclamation mark, it might be helpful. The other thing is a personal request. I mean, I don't know if it's down to us or to the actual KPMG, is that having both the reports at the same time, making like 240 pages is quite demanding. I mean, in future, could we consider maybe taking these on 2 different meetings, if possible? If it's not, then I suppose they're generated by the same work, and then put out at the same time. But it would certainly help me drill down a little bit more further than I do when I've got 2 reports to look through. So that's just really feedback. Thank you, Chairman.
No, thank you. So the significant audit risk is a kind of auditor speak, which basically says where are you going to focus your work, John? So what are the sensitive, judgmental areas where you're going to focus your work, and then we carry that narrative through to show you that this is what we've done. It isn't a risk. So I'll try and get rid of the exclamation marks in future to take away some of that jeopardy. And I'd love to split it over 2 meetings, to be honest. So if ideally, if you look at those councils that didn't have the gaps in assurance in those 2 years, or you look at NHS or other similar sectors, we take our ISO 260 when we complete the audit, and then we take the annual audit report as the kind of wash up of the summary of everything we've done and everything we've concluded. So very much that's where we'd like to get to.
Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Culver.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Mentions in the report that the value of the council's land and buildings at 31st of March was 348.4 million. I think in the Treasury report, sorry, it says that debt's due to go up to 312 and our authorised limit is 382.9. Bearing in mind that our current debt is getting quite close to the total value of our land and buildings, is that something that we ought to be concerned about?
So obviously land and building is only one of your assets. So you've got obviously investment property and other assets as well. So it's not a particular concern about those two numbers getting close. But you should be concerned about the financial health of the council and that its level of usable reserves, which I'm sure we have discussed before.
Thank you very much. And just one other question, if I may, Chairman. Page 31, it says we've got a forecast budget gap of 30 million. Does that include the figures that we now have from the local government settlement that was announced before Christmas?
I would have to check that unless Chris or Shannon knows off the top of their head.
I'm not certain, John, but I believe probably the timing of this report, I'm thinking it's pre that, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure. You probably need to check that. You're backing for that number, perhaps, as well, on the file.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions on this report? Councillor Cottingham, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So for me, I think the pages 39, the internal control environment, Mr. Brown, is probably the most important aspect of the report. It's very much how we do things, and that then if we do things in the right way from an internal control perspective, that means the outcomes, which, as you said earlier, regarding the financial statements, you can have assurance that they are correct. So within this report, we have 6 new control deficiencies from pages 39. And I just wanted to get a flavour of how we compare against other similar clients from a council perspective. So I think we have 1 of status 1 and we've got 3 of status 2 and 2 of status 3. So it's just really getting a flavour of the maturity of our internal control environment, how we compare, and there's anything else which we can be doing better from an internal control perspective.
Sure. So I think there are a couple of these recommendations. So management review of expenditure and accruals, and probably actuarial assumptions that are you will see them at most councils. Because councils often will effectively outsource their pensions work to actuaries that have the skills, etc., etc. Auditing standards says, well, you should have a view as management whether what your actuary tells you is sensible as well. So we see that in a lot of places. So that one and the management review and authorisation of expenditure and accruals is one you'll find a lot of places. The unauthorised approvals of capital grants, the risk one, we don't see many of those reported. So normally we have a handful of 2s and 3s, but it's quite rare to have that kind of risk, and you'll see from the management response that that person's no longer an employee, and there's been checks and balances put in place to respond to that. And yeah, and some so I would say it's slightly higher than similar councils, but I'll pause there, I think.
Thank you.
Mr. Southgate, apologies if you've had your hand up for a while. I couldn't see you on the screen, but go ahead.
Good evening. Just to understand the meaning of the fees, there are two sections on fees. One has two kind of ominous to be confirmed numbers in there, and then about 4 pages down, there's another set of fees with a £38,000 as other assurance services, which I assume are not included in the top table. Given the services that we have had off you, I presume we've authorised whatever is in to be confirmed so far, in which case, what is that level in terms of fees that we are currently indebted to? And do you have an idea of what it would end up at, please?
Yeah, sure. So the 297 is a scale fee that's set by the PSAA. So that's the kind of, that's the base audit fee. The 38 is work we do on, it's what we call other assurance work. So it's work we do on housing benefit. So there's various reports we have to issue to the housing regulator and housing benefit. So separate team, they do the work, and for that year there's been a number of those, which comes to the 38. The fee variations are the TBCs, and we haven't agreed those yet. There's a slightly convoluted way of agreeing those fee variations, if you'll remember from last year. So we expect to submit the fee variations for those 4 bullets underneath, because the standard scale fee at the top assumes that nothing goes, nothing changes and nothing, everything's green and dandy. So your new payroll system in the year would be a good example, that additional work to understand the switch over and make sure everything's come over correctly. We will come up with how many hours that cost us. It then goes to the PSAA, who sense check whether that's sensible, and then it comes back to management for their blessing before we then bill some months later. So the areas we expect are the new payroll system, IFRS 16, which wasn't included in the scale fee, the work we do on the wording of our opinions because of the disclaimer, and the extra work we do for the significant risks on value for money. Yeah, I wouldn't. I haven't got a number in my head at the moment for what those would add up to. I would imagine it'll be 20 around 20k.
Okay, just given the finances are very tight, I would imagine West Berkshire would be very keen to understand what that sort of number is as earliest as possible.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Southgate. Good question. Councillor Drummond.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Back to page 39 of the unauthorised approval of capital grants. And maybe one of the officers could tell me, when did the said person leave the building?
Sorry, it was July last year, July 2025, Councillor Drummond.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Members, anything else on the second report? If not, as there's no decision needed, if the committee is satisfied to note the report and the timescales provided, I'd like to move to the next item. And that is item 7, the internal audit update report, Q2 2025-26, and Mrs. Gillespie to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, I'm a bit croaky. So the report is my standard format to give committee an update each quarter. This is for Q2. The appendices are the same sort of supporting information, but what I'm wanting to do is just highlight two key areas that I want to go through with committee. The first one is section 4.5, and as the heading's mentioning, it's an emerging issue that I'm wanting to highlight to committee. It's a piece of work that we're doing on school budget deficits, and this links into the schools that are operating with a budget deficit, and the council has an increasing number of these. And the funding for these schools is met by the DSG grant, and there's something called the schools block. And the funding for the schools is all met from the schools block. But what the audit identified was because of the increasing number of schools going into deficit and the increasing value of the deficit, as well as a reduction in the number of schools with a surplus balance, the overall total in this account that's called a school reserve fund has depleted over the last few years, and we have forecast the depletion next year is probably going to go into deficit. Now, the impact of that is if this reserve fund, even though it's kept separate from council funds, if it goes into deficit, any balance would need to be met from the council's general reserve fund. So it has an impact in the accounts on the council's general reserve fund level. So it is of concern, and there's a need to forecast the position and the impact it's going to have on the council's reserve fund. And this hadn't been happening previously because the fund has always had a reasonably healthy looking balance, but it's only over the last 2 to 3 years that it has reduced quite significantly. So that section is to highlight to members. So I don't know if anybody's got any queries on that first point.
Thank you. Councillor Coyle.
Thank you. Mr. Gillespie, you mentioned that it was partly as a result of more schools going into deficit, but also a smaller number of schools not being in, I'm sorry, I've had a very long day, surplus. Could I just check, would it have any bearing on any of this when schools leave, when they become academies? And is that, and how much of that is how much of this is attributable to that happening as opposed to, financial problems by individual schools?
The one school became an academy, I think it was about a year ago, 18 months ago, and their balance did have an impact. It was masking what was happening underneath it because they had quite a large surplus balance. At the moment, the projections going forward in the next couple of years, it's the ones that we're aware of, it is not going to have a significant impact. It will reduce it slightly, the current surplus, but that won't have a massive impact, is our view at the moment. Obviously, if more schools decide to go down that route, that would have another impact. So it's one of those things to keep an eye on, but the ones that we're aware of at the moment is not going to have much of a difference on the figures that we're forecasting.
Thank you. Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mrs. Gillespie. In 4.5b, it says at the end, we noted the potential for the school reserve fund to go into deficit in the near future has not been factored into any financial forecasting. And that's the line that concerns me about it not being factored into forecasting. Does that mean you're not sure at the moment what impact it might have on the general reserve?
It wasn't in the MTFS. It hasn't been future forecasted, but it's been flagged up, so it can be in future. But at that point in time, it wasn't on the radar that it could go into deficit.
Okay. Yeah. Shannon, your hand's raised. Would you like to make a comment?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Finance has been liaising with internal audit on this point. Historically, it wasn't factored into the way the MTFS was built and operated. Because there were balances held in the schools still have balances. It is a factor. Some very detailed data collection process and procedures are now being implemented with the schools. So we have more up-to-date information so we can do detailed planning and monitoring for future financial years. At the moment, it would be a risk to the reserves If all the school balances went into deficit in their entirety, that would then hit our general fund. So it is held as risk currently, with future modelled impacts will be coming in the future MTFS. Just to give members some reassurance.
Thank you. Yeah. Councillor Cottam.
Chairman, is there any way we can understand why these schools are going into deficit? I did ask, maybe the wrong person has pointed out by Councillor Burke, that, you know, of the KPMG, Mr. Brown, but I mean, does the council understand why they're actually going into that? And so we're not going blind.
I can answer that. Can I just clarify the point that KPMG made about school deficits is a different point. That issue is the higher needs block, and there's a national issue with higher needs block increasing because of the SEND provision. There's an override with that we're allowed by central government to have a separate account to hold this deficit, and it's that KPMG were talking about. What I'm talking, so that's just the higher needs block that we've got an issue with in deficit. What I'm referring to is the schools block, and that's the direct funding that we give to the schools. When Shannon was mentioning about if all schools went into deficit, it would hit our general fund. We've also got an issue with a number of schools with a reducing surplus. So all these totals are added together. But what we're saying is it's not just the deficit balances, because the surpluses were offsetting the deficits. The surpluses are also reducing. So the two together is having a knock-on effect of a large decrease in the account, in the actual balance, sorry. So there's the two things going on. There's a larger piece of work that we're aware of going on in education services to understand to what degree what's happening and impacting on these figures. We know that SEND provision in maintained schools is costly and expensive. There's falling pupil numbers, and the funding for DSG is based on pupil numbers. They get funding per pupil. So that's an issue as well. And there are two key drivers for this reduction in the, so the schools have got less funding, and then it's a case of the needing to be more effective in budget management, but they can only spend to a degree what they're getting. And so it's it's a national picture, but I think we do have an issue with lower numbers of pupils compared with the national picture, which is obviously having an impact.
Thank you, Chairman. The imperfect storm by sounds of it.
Thank you. But I'm certainly reassured by Shannon's words about the reporting that's now taking place. Members, any other comments on this? Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Chair, there was that second point I was wanting to cover in my report, sorry.
Go ahead.
So this was in section 5.5. There's one limited assurance report for what we call section 17 funding, and that's just listing the key areas of weakness we identified. I think I mentioned at the September committee, because there's a query raised about what is section 17. It is financial support for children in need, and it's discretionary, and it's when the families have no other route of financial support, that the council can make discretionary decisions on whether to give financial support, and that's what it's about.
Thank you. Councillor Berwick.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mrs. Gillespie. Can you just expand a bit on the limited assurance relating to section 17? What does that mean? I don't understand it.
Well, the limited assurance is our opinion on the control environment, and we identified quite a few weaknesses in the controls and how it was operating, which is why we're saying it's limited assurance. It's just the opinion that we give of the controls, and where it's limited.
But there's but you mentioned a separate earlier, didn't you, when you said that there is increasing demand? So there's two things going on. Is there?
No, that was a separate point. This is in children's services, not linked to schools, not linked to the kids.
No, but I thought when you introduced the bit in 5.5. Let me find it again. Sorry. You said that in 5.5, it says there was ambiguity relating to the types of expenditure that can be charged to Section 17 cost centres and costs incurred are regularly exceeding the budget allocations. Is that related to your judgment that there's limited assurance as to the controls?
Which bit? Sorry, the
5.5.
Yeah.
5.5 E. It talks about ambiguity relating to the types of expenditure that can be charged to Section 17 cost centre.
Yeah, this was just more to do with the factor between finance and the service area and what the budgets are supposed to cover. And there were certain other things going so there was a difference of view of what should be coded against those budgets.
So I can be assured that we're not, there's limited assurance that financial controls related to section 17 are appropriate or accurate.
I think the key thing was they've got a framework there, they've got a process. What we found was it's not always being followed.
I guess my concern here is, what does this mean for our children?
The children themselves are getting the funding. It's more the record keeping and validating for somebody to give us the paperwork to say this is what this payment was for, and the documents were always there or they weren't comprehensive, but we could see the payments were going out. So it's not the actual delivery of the payments. It's were they processed effectively, correctly, were they authorised, and it was more the central control of it rather than actually the payments being made. If that helps.
That's helpful. Thank you very much.
Councillor Cottingham.
Thank you, Chair. It probably brings me nicely on that previous question from Councillor Burke to Appendix F, which has, from a risk management perspective, Appendix E, has the risk matrices. So you see by audit the level of recommendations, where they are from a risk perspective. The majority are in that green zone, but as Councillor Burke has quite rightly identified, for Section 17 support, you can see the level of risk in there for the second recommendation, which is the Section 17 support over making sure we're coding correctly the expenditure for Section 17. So yeah, it's something for us to take on board to make sure that the finance team is coding per the rules, that we're not either over-coding or under-coding. I think that's probably the risk. There's probably no, as you say, you identified the risk to children. It's probably more of a risk that we're actually coding the expenditure correctly.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Members, any more comments on that? Okay, as there's no decision needed, if the committee is satisfied to note the report, we'll move on to the next item, which is item 8 and the Treasury Management Media Review Report 25-26. And Mr. Dagnall to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. A lengthy document, obviously 25 pages. It's the half-year Treasury report. If I talk high level and then point you perhaps just to a few key sections. Highlights are that during the 6 months to the end of September, the Council complied with the Treasury and Prudential indicators, which is good to see, obviously consistent with past reports. A testing financial backdrop at the moment, obviously within the Council and externally. The report does paint a picture, I think, of a well-managed Treasury section, consistent with the audit findings, I think, as well, that obviously KPMG, in their review of 24-25's activity, did not note any findings, any negativities. The report discusses that over time, we've reduced spend in the capital programme. I'll point you to the relevant sections in a second. We've continued to liaise closely with the Treasury Advisor, MUFG, during this 6 months. And as an aside, because of the date of this report, the fact that it is to September 25, I have also taken a look at the Q3 report, the Treasury management and investment and borrowing strategy that will be going on to the other boards in February, just to make sure that everything's consistent and for that quarter as well, we've complied with the indicators, which is good to see. I think in pointing you to certain sections within this 6 months report to September 25, I think 4.4 is quite key because it discusses the drop in the capital programme, down from, I think it's 72 million that was approved in the strategy down to 58.2 million. That is because we've slipped a number of projects intentionally into 26-27, but it's part of an overall effort to reduce the capital programme up to 28-29, and that again is brought out in the Q3 report that will go on to other committees in coming weeks. 4.7 is another key graphic that discusses the CFR slight increase up to 344 from the 338 that was originally envisaged, and we've a table in there that itemises why the 6 million difference, predominantly the EFS that was secured after the strategy was set. So the EFS would have been 13 million as a big element in there, and some smaller adjustments for leases. But again, that is itemised on 4.7. And finally, the last couple I would point you to probably is 4.15, the discussion there around the Treasury and prudential limits, that again in the first half of 25-26 we've got complete compliance. The IA report that was produced recently, I'm not sure exactly when, Julie, may be able to advise, but again that references no issues in there in terms of negative findings of the Treasury review of the Treasury function. There's one small issue in 4.22. In this period, there was it looks as though reporting of an isolated one-off with regard to counterparty limits. A 26 grand, I believe, interest receipt was added to the account, and it tipped, unfortunately, just over the threshold it reads for 8 million. With one of those counterparties, it was picked up very quickly, 3rd of June, as reported in there at 4.22, and corrected so that we very quickly, picked that up and addressed that. But that was a one-off, I believe. But I just wanted to draw that to your attention because again, I think it's there, so we need to report that. And that was pretty much it. As I say, being conscious that this is a report to September, so I can take any questions, obviously, that you want to raise.
Thank you, Mr. Dangle. That's a very thorough introduction, and positive. Thank you. Members, any comments or questions on that? No. Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I look at 4.12, please? It looks to me, from a quick tot up, there's £42 million worth of borrowing in the first half of the year. How does that compare with previous years?
Yes, the new borrowing that was taken out. I'm not certain. I wouldn't have it just to hand because I think we'd need to go back to the equivalent table, councillor. At least in 4.12, it does note the fact that we repaid a higher amount of the 49.2, and overall borrowing did come down on the year-end position versus the half year at September 25. But I'd need to check that number. I've not got that to hand, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Mr. Southgate, go ahead.
Thank you. The table 4.5, I just found the headings a little confusing in that you've got approved capital programme.
Yeah.
Which from my sort of background, approved means that's what you're definitely going to spend. And then you've got your forecast, which is speculative. Would the first column be better expressed as the budget as opposed to approved?
Yeah, I mean, I've not got the full history of the text of why that was in there. I mean, I would imagine it was because we probably sent that to council. I think Shannon's got her hand up actually, so she might answer. I think probably because it was sent to full council and it was approved. We're probably just trying to make that distinction between what was signed off and then what we would envisage, as a later position for September, reflecting the fact, as I said, that we've intentionally slip projects and reduced spend and attempted to manage capital spend to get a hold on things as an overall means. Sorry, Shannon, I think you.
Okay, no, it's more, I just, if the word budget was in there, it might actually be a little clearer.
No, that's fine. Yeah, we can take that on board, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Shannon, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I would just say that approved programme is the approved budget, but yes, we will take the point that we can make that clearer in future tables. So that's absolutely fine. I was going to go back to Councillor Wollaston's comments. We don't have the figures, but we can supply them. We'll just need to go back through the records. We would expect to see probably quite high payments going through in the first part of the year because we've done a lot of short-term borrowing. So that's sort of 2, 3, 4 months. So what you will be seeing there is a lot of payments coming off and being cleared and refinanced. So it would not necessarily be unusual to start to see a lot of borrowing in the first part of the year because we'll be clearing the shorter-term financing of the previous year. But as Chris said, the team can go and pull that together and provide that detail. But that is probably what is driving those sort of values. It's a lot of refinancing.
Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Chairman. In 4.4, the table there are some, we've gone over a little bit, I think, on adult social care and also quite significantly on community services. Are you able to shed some light on why those two things have happened, please?
Again, I'm not trying to be vague on this. It's because I think we've not got the supporting table just immediately behind it. I would need to go away and check, Councillor, but I can do that quite clearly. It's a graphic that's obviously been brought in from a supporting file, which I need to obtain if that's okay. So I'll come back to you if that's all right.
Thank you very much. And another question, if I may, Chairman. I just wondered why we're not spending all of our SIL money. I know that in the past we've offered up the opportunity to apply for SIL funding from the main pot, and whether we've got plans to do that again to make sure we make good use of that money.
Straight to me. I'm not sure in terms of the application of future and existing SIL monies. We obviously are in close contact within finance with the SIL team. We have regular monthly meetings now looking at current amounts, future amounts. I'm not sure in terms of how we would apply those monies. Shannon again is perhaps going to come in here on this.
Thank you. It will depend how progressed the particular projects that have SIL attributed to them actually are. So this forecast was based on the progress of specific projects. Specific projects have specific funding streams, and then we will forecast on that basis. So you may see a move at that on Q3, depending on what the forecasts are, and probably outturn. So it could be just those particular projects are still work in progress. They may have some slippage. So it depends on physical spend that SIL can be attributed to.
Thank you. I do have one other quick question, sorry. On the grants, it says 29.4 million approved in 25-26. Is it possible to get from officers a bit more information about where those grants are from? I'm very conscious that as councils, we're very reliant on grant funding for very specific projects rather than having the ability to make our own decisions about what we spend money on. But it would be useful, I think, to have a list of those grants so we can understand. Thank you.
We can absolutely provide that because we'll have that at a granular level, and we monitor grants, as you say, Councillor, in the year anyway, revenue grants, capital grants. So yeah, that's understood. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Cottingham. Did you want to?
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up the point on Councillor Culver's question over SIL. I think it's my understanding we will spend that. It's almost as if that's free money. We'll spend it before going to the market to borrow it. It would seem silly for us not to do so. And picking up on Councillor Wilson's question over the refinancing, I suppose the best way to answer that, it's not new money, it's new borrowing because we're having to refinance because we have our own internal rules over not having more than 30% of our borrowing less than 1 year, but also with interest rates being higher than our weighted average cost of borrowing, we've been managing that to then go back into the market to refinance for a longer period once interest rates are starting to fall. And hopefully, I think they've fallen by about 1% in the last 12 months or so. So what we'll see is that we'll be going into the market once we're below that weighted average cost of borrowing around about 3.9%, I think it's at the moment. I'm getting a nod of the head from my 151 officer. And at the moment, we can borrow from Public Works Loan Board at what rate?
Roughly 5. It depends on what period we are borrowing for, but roughly 5 is a reasonable assumption.
As I say, we'll be maintaining the short term until that Public Works Loan Board falls below than 5. That's determined upon the confidence in the Rachel Reeves as a treasurer and UK gilts and everything else, and being able to pay back. So it's a little bit more complicated than just straightforward interest rates, which we get on the high street.
Thank you. As there's no decision needed, if the committee is satisfied to note the report, we'll move to the next item, which is item 9, financial year end 2025 to 26, year end planning document. And Mr. Dagnall to introduce, please.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, obviously we talked at length regarding 24-25. They need to complete that set of accounts as a matter of urgency within the next month, 27th of February being the deadline. This report is for 25-26 financial year. The planning that's involved internally within finance, and obviously the various non-finance sections that do a great job of contributing to the ultimate production as well of the statements of accounts, the draft statements of accounts. So I think key sections in here, probably 2.2a references the need to prioritise 24-25 and sign, as John said this evening, by the 27th of February. And we then, for the rest of the report, have tried to focus on 25-26 and basically say that the deadline for this time in terms of a draft set of accounts is 30th of June 26, in line with last year, not moved. What we've attempted to do in this document is split the file into two. So we've got Appendix A, which is the accounting policies for the council, roll forward from last year. Obviously, the majority are roll forward policies, but we do review for changes, which I can come on to in a second. And then Appendix B, the council's internal timetable at a very granular level. Officers identified, marked up to specific steps that, again, is a tried and tested process within finance, whereby we would monitor progress of those deliverables on a weekly, and as we get nearer to the end, key stages, daily basis, just to make sure that everything's on track. If we take other key sections in the report in turn, I would say 4.1 references the fact that at the moment we haven't finalised exactly when KPMG will begin their planning work for that year. Typically, John again would be able to perhaps come in, but I think February, March has been the time KPMG have review. So we would be envisaging something similar in advance of the council's close down at the end of March. 4.3 references that we're now into year 2 of IFRS 16 leases, which came in last year. Again, in terms of 24-25 feedback from KPMG, no issues noted in that adoption, in the adoption of that statement, that reporting standard. For the second year, we will engage MUFG to advise and support in terms of the disclosures. We would expect more straightforward necessarily this year because it's not the first year of implementation. 4.5 considers again an item that we've discussed in passing only up to now with KPMG, John's team, indexation. This is a change for all councils whereby valuations, there's still a need to do valuations of assets every 5 years, but what you're now expected to do as a council is do annual indexation. So you're meant to basically assess assets against available markets or indices each year. to gain more comfort, gain more assurance. That will obviously support KPMG in their testing. We will be able to provide more assurance. The auditors will need to tailor their testing accordingly, but it should generate increased confidence. Where we can't do annual indexation for any reason, we would need to do desktop valuations every 3 years on assets now. The council has been in a position in recent years where we've always frequently valued assets anyway, so we don't again envisage this being a particular problem, but it's a thought for this year. Appendix A is as final as it can be at this point, but we are awaiting the sort of final legislation, external legislation that will govern this area. So Appendix A, I think, is probably subject to change, possibly for indexation, and maybe anything else that comes out with the dedicated schools grant in the run up to publishing these accounts, because there may be something. The override for the accounts is still in place till 2028, but we may need to revisit the accounting policies. I think Appendix B again is pretty much final. That at the moment is being reviewed by the council's internal teams. Will reflect all feedback. The only key changes here, I would say, are going to be the fact that we've brought dates forward because of Easter. This is now 5th of April this year rather than I think it was the 19th last year, and we've attempted to produce this timetable with more of an emphasis on allowing spare time in June for management to review, to scrutinise, to challenge before we need to meet that deadline at the end of June for the preparation of the drafts. One final thing to say on this timetable is in Appendix B is that we will attempt to build in John and KPMG's finding around accruals, just to make sure that we are working to consistent de minimis thresholds in terms of what we will allow as an accrual at the year end. We will also attempt to make sure that there's increased backing on the files, because again, John's report suggested that as item 2 in the ISA 260 report. And that was pretty much it, trying to keep to time as well with this. I can answer any questions, hopefully.
Thank you. Members, any comments regarding this report? Councillor Berwick.
Somewhat trivial comment on presentation, really. It would be helpful if Appendix A and Appendix B had their own entry in the outline so that we can flip between them more readily.
No problem.
Thank you. Councillor Culver.
Content was great there.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Dagnall. The draft accounts each year, I think, are very useful. We looked at the ones last year and they've helped to inform our agenda for scrutiny. We've looked at key governance areas for improvement, so that's been very useful. We tried to make sure that we're as joined up as possible across the committees with the various papers, so thank you for that. It says in here the DSG accumulated deficit for the end of March last year was 16.1 million. Do we know what the figure is at the moment, or is that a figure that we can anticipate getting when we look at the budget? And the second question, just to check, there's some to be confirmed in there. Do we anticipate that we'll get that information when the budget is published? Thank you.
I think in terms of the deficit, again, this is not a get out, but I'm not in the team that manages. I'm in financial reporting. I'm not in the team that directly manages this area. Shannon may be able to help. I've not seen any estimates myself at the minute. If that's okay.
Hello, yes. We are expecting the deficit to have increased beyond the 16.1. All that detail will be coming through in the budget papers shortly. So that is through its final verification checks at the moment, and more detail will be released when the budget papers are made public shortly.
And if I come in, Councillor, on the to be confirmed, yes, the reason they're in there at the moment is because just for intentionally for the graphics team that we use, we need to leave space in, we need to leave almost placeholders, reminders. Those figures will be populated in time. A lot of them, I've just checked percentages, aren't they? So they will be for final amounts, final percentages once in. But we will populate. Obviously, we're some way off the year end. That's the reason.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. As per the recommendation in the report, it's requested that the committee approve the draft accounting policies that will be applied in the production of the Council's 2025-26 draft statement of accounts as outlined in Appendix A, and also to note point 2.2 B, A, B and C in the report. Can I ask for a proposer to move that recommendation? Councillor Cottam, thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Berwick, thank you. Can members please indicate by raising their hand if they agree with this motion? Thank you. So that's unanimous. So we now move to item 10, risk management, Q2 2025-26 report, part 1. And Mr. Sargent to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. Much of this report will be as the committee is used to receiving it, but there were a couple of things that I wanted to draw your attention to briefly, if I might. So turning to section 4 particularly, the committee in its meeting in the autumn last year spent quite some time talking about the risk approach and risk assurance in the context of the new risk management strategy for the council. And we've been doing some work in recent months looking at how we evolve that and embed that better in our day-to-day operations. And so I wanted to draw your attention to some changes that we've made in the report where we're starting to focus more on risk appetite, and an explanation of that is set out in the report that I won't rehash for you. But essentially that enables us to think not just about the rating of the risk, but how it compares with our risk appetite, our tolerance for risk as an organisation. And if I could draw your attention to the table in 6.1, you will see there an example of how that manifests itself in terms of the presentation. So just looking at the risk across the top, which is one of our assets risks, you'll see in the final box there that we're quite significantly outside of our risk tolerance. And that enables both the committee and also officers to focus on those areas where we're outside of our risk tolerance. And of course, any risk where that is happening is a concern for us. And so we're starting to embed that, which was set out in the risk management strategy last year, starting to embed that much more into how we work across the organisation, both corporately and also in our directorates as well. So you'll see in section 4 a bit more explanation about how that works, which I hope is helpful, but also some proposals about how we're looking to embed that over the coming months working across the directorates. Those were the things I wanted to draw attention to, Chair. I don't know if Councillor Cottingham has any additional comments that he wants to make because he's been quite involved in this.
Thank you, Mr. Sargent. I just say thank you very much for embracing some of the proposal we've made and just enhancing the strategy, which takes into account both what is risk, but more importantly, what's our appetite towards risk, because we all manage risk. We all have different appetites to it, but it's making sure we have that consistency throughout the council, which is really, really key. So you're all singing from the same hymn sheet to understand what is the consistency throughout all employees within the business.
Thank you. Okay, members, any questions on this report? All right. Well, in that case, as per the recommendation in the report, it's requested that the committee be informed of the current, as at the end of September 2025, position and actions undertaken to minimise the impact for the existing 16 risks on the Corporate Risk Register, CCR, which is described in Appendix B and detailed in Appendix C in the confidential Part 2 of this report. And B, confirm the suitability of the approach for, of CRR visualization, which incorporates risk appetites to assess each individual risk in relation to the levels deemed acceptable by the council's risk management strategy. And finally, C, approves the proposed rectification of the omission in the council strategy to determine the risk appetite for personal, staff or customer risks as cautious until the time comes for the overall review of the current strategy 24 to 27. Can I ask for a proposer to move that motion? Councillor Berwick, you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. Are we going to go on to discuss the contents of the risk register in
part 2 discussion?
Okay.
Yeah, we'll come on to that. So I'm looking for a proposer for that recommendation, Councillor Berwick. Thank you. And a seconder. I'll second. So members, can you indicate by raising your hand if you agree with this motion? Thank you. Unanimous. So we'll move on to item 11, which is exclusion of press and public. As the discussion of the following item will likely set my watch off and disclose exempt information as described in paragraphs 3 and 5 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. I move a motion to exclude the press and public. Is that seconded? Councillor Macrow, thank you. Will all those in favour of the motion please raise their hand? That's unanimous, thank you. Therefore, I call an end to the public part of this meeting. Could we please end the broadcast?